Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. My name is John, and for the longest time, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Sandra and I had been together for 8 years and everything seemed just right. We had a comfortable home, shared dreams, and a connection I believed was unbreakable. Everyone we knew admired us as a couple. The Melniks are perfect, they would say, as if we were the gold standard for a happy marriage. But, as it turned out, love is not always enough to keep a marriage intact. It all started when Sandra began visiting her parents more often than usual. At first it seemed sweet, thoughtful even. She'd say, "John, I'm going to see my parents today. They've been feeling lonely." I'd smile and nod, thinking how lucky they were to have such a devoted daughter. Her parents lived a little outside the city, about a 30-minute drive away, so it made sense that she'd want to visit them often. But soon, these visits became a weekly occurrence, then twice a week, and before long, it felt like she was spending more time with them than with me. Sandra would leave the house in the late afternoon, come back around midnight, sometimes later, looking different. She'd be glowing, almost as if she'd stepped out of a spa or something. I noticed it. She'd come home happier than I'd seen her in years, humming to herself, a small smile playing on her lips. I remember one night when she came home unusually late. She walked in, kicked off her shoes, and plopped onto the couch beside me. "Had a good time with your parents?" I asked. She nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Mom's doing much better, and Dad's always got those silly jokes." "That's great," I said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something in her smile didn't reach her eyes. Over time, I started noticing little inconsistencies. One evening, Sandra came home wearing a scarf, even though it wasn't cold outside. Another time, I found a strange scent on her jacket, something musky and distinctly masculine, not one of her usual floral perfumes. "Isn't this a new scent?" I asked, holding up the jacket. Sandra looked at it, then back at me, her expression calm but careful. "Oh yes. Dad was showing me one of his new colognes. He's been trying out different ones lately." I nodded slowly, trying to push down the growing unease. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something didn't feel right. Then, there were the phone calls. Sandra would step out of the room to take them, her voice low, her tone soft. Once I caught the tail end of a conversation when I entered the room unexpectedly. "Okay, I'll see you soon," she whispered before hanging up. When she saw me, she jumped. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just a friend from work," she replied, her voice a little too quick, too high-pitched. I wanted to press her, but I didn't. I let it slide. I wanted to trust her. A few weeks later, I finally gathered the courage to confront her. "Sandra, can we talk?" I asked one evening as we were having dinner. The air was filled with the scent of her homemade lasagna, but I could hardly taste it. My mind was too preoccupied. "Of course," she said, her fork pausing mid-air. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure how to begin. I didn't want to sound accusatory, but I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up any longer. "It's about your visits to your parents. You've been going more often lately, and I feel like something's off." She set her fork down gently, her face softening. "John, you're overthinking. My parents need me, and I enjoy spending time with them. It's nothing more than that." I took a deep breath, trying to choose my words carefully. "I get it, Sandra. I really do. I know your parents mean the world to you, and I love that you care so much for them. It's one of the things I admire about you." She smiled slightly, perhaps thinking the conversation was over, but I wasn't done. "It's just that," I continued, "we barely spend time together anymore. It feels like every night you're with them, and when you come home, you're too tired to even talk. I miss us, Sandra. I miss the nights we'd sit on the couch, just you and me, watching some silly show or talking about our day." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of frustration. "What do you want me to do, John? Stop visiting them? They've been needing me more lately. I can't just ignore them because you feel lonely." "I understand that," I said, my voice softening. "But I need you too, Sandra. We both need to find a balance." She sighed, still visibly frustrated. "You know my parents are my first priority, John. They need my help right now. Things will get back to normal eventually." Without waiting for my response, she stood up abruptly and headed toward the bedroom, leaving me sitting at the table staring at my untouched plate of food. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the silence of the room. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind wouldn't rest. Did I push her too much? Was I being unreasonable? I replayed our conversation over and over, wondering if I had been too demanding, too needy. Maybe I should have just been more supportive, given her the space she needed. 2 days later, Sandra was in the shower, getting ready for yet another visit to her parents. I was sitting on the bed checking my emails when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me glance at the screen. It was a message from someone named Lucas. "Hey babe, can't wait for tonight. I missed you already," he wrote. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Babe? Lucas? Curiosity, dread, and disbelief mixed in my gut as I picked up the phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it and opened the messaging app. The conversation with Lucas was right there, in plain sight. I started scrolling through their messages, my breath hitching with each word. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Me too, wish we didn't have to sneak around. I'll tell John I'm going to my parents again. He doesn't suspect a thing." I could barely breathe. The time she claimed to be visiting her parents, she had been meeting this man. The warm, glowing happiness she brought home wasn't from spending time with her family, it was from him. She had been using her parents as an excuse to sneak behind my back. I couldn't believe it. Sandra was cheating on me. I quickly put the phone back on the nightstand and tried to steady my breathing. The shower stopped, and moments later, Sandra stepped out, towel wrapped around her. She glanced at me, her face neutral, unaware of what I had just uncovered. As she got dressed, she spoke casually. "I'll probably be home late again tonight. Mom's been feeling a bit down, and I want to be there for her." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Okay," I said, my tone even. "Give my greetings to your parents." She smiled faintly. "I will." I watched her finish getting ready, each movement now seeming foreign, like I was looking at a stranger. Inside, I was crumbling, but outwardly, I remained composed. As Sandra left the house, something inside me refused to sit still. I had to know the truth. I quickly grabbed my keys and followed her, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. My heart pounded with every turn she took, expecting her to head to some clandestine meeting with Lucas. But to my surprise, she drove straight to her parents' house. I parked a little down the street, my confusion growing. "What's going on?" She went inside, greeting her parents warmly at the door. I stayed in my car, watching, waiting for something, anything, out of the ordinary. An hour passed. There were no signs of anything unusual. The house was quiet, lights on in the living room, the silhouette of her parents occasionally passing by the windows. I waited another hour, still nothing. She was just there, in her parents' house, like she said she would be. Finally, after another 30-minute wait, with no unusual movements or unexpected visitors, I decided to head back home. The whole drive, my mind raced. Was I wrong? Was she really just visiting her parents? When I got home, I sat on the couch staring blankly at the wall, trying to make sense of what I had seen, or rather, what I hadn't seen. About an hour later, Sandra returned, just like she said she would. She looked tired but calm, dropping her purse on the table before heading to the bedroom. I watched her, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. She was supposed to meet Lucas. I saw the messages. So why did she stay at her parents' house all night? Doubt started creeping in. Could I be wrong? Am I overthinking everything? But the messages were there, clear as day. How can those messages not be true? Something wasn't adding up, and it gnawed at me. The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still very wrong. The next day, Sandra was set to visit her parents again that night, but the doubt still lingered in my mind. What's really going on? I was still unsure, my mind swirling with the contradictions of her behavior and the messages I had seen. I had to know more, so when she wasn't around, I picked up my phone and called her parents' house. Her mother answered, and I put on my best calm voice, masking the storm of questions in my head. "Hi, Lauren, how are you?" I greeted her. "Oh, John, It's so good to hear from you. I'm doing well, thank you. How about you? I'm doing okay, I said, keeping it casual. I would love to visit you both, but I've just been really busy with work lately. Things are hectic at the moment. Oh, I understand, she replied warmly. Work can be demanding, especially with the way things are these days. We made small talk for a bit, and then I casually brought up Sandra. You know, Sandra has been visiting you a lot lately. I'm glad you two get to spend so much time together. Her mother chuckled. Yes, she's been coming over quite often. Most of the time, just for an hour or two to check on us. But yesterday she stayed the whole night. We had a lovely time just talking and having dinner. I froze. My mind raced as I processed her words. An hour or two? When she'd been visiting them, she'd always been gone for 4 or 5 hours, I thought. I quickly composed myself, forcing my voice to remain steady. That's great. I'm glad you two are so close. I know Sandra really enjoys spending time with you. Her mother went on, unaware of the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. Oh, she does. We always have a lovely time. I'm happy to have her around. Yeah, she's great, I replied, trying to act normal. Well, I won't keep you. I just wanted to check in. Give my best to Jack. I will, John. Take care of yourself. We hung up, and I sat there in stunned silence, the phone still in my hand. An hour or two? She's been gone for hours when she visits them. Where does she go for the rest of that time? My mind clicked into place. She wasn't spending hours at her parents' house. She was only there for a couple of hours at most. The rest of the time, those missing hours, she was somewhere else. Somewhere I hadn't known about. Then it hit me like a brick. She's been using her visits to her parents as a cover, a camouflage. She was going to her parents' house for a couple of hours, enough to seem like she was there, and then she'd leave to meet Lucas. The longer she stayed out, the more time she had to sneak away. The pieces fell into place. The messages, the lies, the missing hours. They all made sense now. She had been using her parents as a cover, pretending to visit them, while secretly sneaking behind my back to be with Lucas. I couldn't believe it. Sandra was cheating on me, and I had been blind to it for so long. If I hadn't insisted on finding the truth, I probably would have never learned what was happening because her lies were so well planned. That evening, as Sandra took a shower to get ready for her visit to her parents' house, I couldn't shake the thoughts of what I had just discovered. I knew I had to check her phone again. With a sense of urgency, I picked it up and unlocked it, my heart racing as I scanned through her messages, hoping for something new, something that might explain it all. And then I saw them. New messages from Lucas. Hey babe, something unexpected came up and I won't be able to see you tonight. But I'll be free tomorrow night. Can't wait to see you again. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. That's why she stayed at her parents' house so long yesterday. She was supposed to meet Lucas, but something had happened to him, and he couldn't make it. So she spent all that extra time with her parents as an excuse, pretending everything was normal. As I sat there, a mix of anger and betrayal washed over me. But I knew I had to follow her again. I couldn't let this go. Tonight she was meeting with Lucas again, and I had to know the truth. When she finally left the house that night, I got into my car and followed her. I watched as she drove to her parents' house again. I stayed parked nearby, waiting for any sign of what she was doing. An hour passed, then another. I was starting to feel like I was chasing ghosts, but I had to stay patient. Finally, Sandra came out of the house and got into her car. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. I followed her again, trying to keep my distance. She drove to a bar downtown, and when she pulled up, I couldn't believe my eyes. Lucas was already there, standing outside waiting for her. I watched as they met, hugged and kissed. My stomach twisted. I pulled out my phone and began snapping pictures, capturing every moment. I couldn't let this moment slip away. This was the proof I needed. After about an hour, they finally got in Sandra's car together. They were laughing, their hands all over each other as they kissed once again. My heart sank further. I followed them as they drove and eventually stopped outside a house, probably Lucas's place. They got out of the car, arms around each other, kissing passionately in the front yard. I snapped more pictures, my hands shaking. This was it. They walked inside, still hugging, still lost in each other. I had it all now. Every picture, every moment. Proof that Sandra had been lying to me, betraying me for months. I could barely breathe as I sat there, the full weight of it crashing over me. Sandra was cheating on me, and I finally had the proof to show it. I drove back home, my mind swirling with a mix of anger and betrayal. The images were burned into my memory, and I knew I couldn't let Sandra get away with what she had done. She had lied to me, sneaked around behind my back, and betrayed our marriage. I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, and I knew exactly how to do it. When she would visit her parents again, I'd go with her. I would expose her lies in front of the very people she had used as a cover. They deserved to know the truth too. Later that night, Sandra came home. I forced myself to act normal, pretending nothing had changed. She smiled at me, exhaustion on her face. "I'm going to take a quick shower," she said, walking past me. "Sure," I replied, keeping my tone casual. After her shower, she didn't say much. "I'm tired," she murmured as she slipped into bed, turning away from me. I watched her for a moment, feeling the storm brewing inside me, but keeping it contained. Finally, 2 days later, Sandra told me she was going to visit her parents again. This time I smiled and said, "You know, I haven't seen them in a while. I'll come with you." She seemed surprised but nodded. "Sure, I think they'd like that." We drove to her parents' house in silence, and I kept my emotions in check. When we arrived, her parents greeted us warmly, unaware of what was about to unfold. We had dinner together, chatting about ordinary things, but I could barely focus. My moment was coming, and I needed to stay calm. After dinner, we moved to the living room, and I decided it was time. "Lauren, Jack," I said, pulling out my phone, "there's something I need to show you." Sandra's eyes widened, a flicker of confusion and fear crossing her face. I connected my phone to the TV, taking a deep breath as the first image appeared on the screen, Sandra and Lucas hugging and kissing at the bar. The room went silent. Sandra gasped. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice shaking. I ignored her, flipping through the photos one by one. "This is what Sandra has been doing while she claimed she was visiting you. After her visits, she was meeting with this man," I said, my voice cold and steady. "She's been using you as an excuse to sneak around so she could leave home without raising my suspicion. But I found out." Her mother looked horrified. "Sandra, is this real?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her father's face was red with shock and anger. "Sandra, explain this. What's going on?" Sandra jumped up, her voice rising. "John, what the hell are you doing?" she shouted, her face pale. "This isn't what it looks like." I stood up, glaring at her. "Really, Sandra? Then what is it? You've been lying to me, lying to your parents, using them as a cover while you meet with Lucas." Her mother shook her head in disbelief. "Sandra, how could you do this? We trusted you. John trusted you." The argument escalated. Sandra tried to defend herself, but the evidence was undeniable. "I was just," she began, but I cut her off. "No more lies, Sandra. This is who you really are. You've been betraying me for months, and I have the proof right here." I pointed to the screen, the images of her and Lucas still glaring back at us. Her parents were devastated, and the tension in the room was suffocating. The web of lies Sandra had woven was unraveling, and there was no escape. Her father, eyes filled with anger and disappointment, stood up and said, "I can't believe what you did, Sandra. We didn't raise you to be a slut. I'm ashamed of you." Sandra broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Please forgive me." But I had reached my breaking point. "It's over, Sandra," I said firmly. "I'm filing for divorce." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "John, please forgive me. I love you. It was a mistake, and I'll do anything to make it right." "No, I can't forgive what you did to me. I'm done with you." My voice was resolute, leaving no room for negotiation. Without another word, I turned and left her parents' house. The weight of the betrayal pressed down on me as I drove back to our house. I packed a few clothes, grabbed my essentials, and checked into a nearby hotel. Sandra called me multiple times during that period, but I didn't answer. I couldn't bear to hear her voice or listen to her excuses. In the days that followed, I consulted a lawyer and initiated the divorce process. The pain was raw, but I knew it was the right decision. Sandra sent messages and left voicemails, but I stayed strong. I was done being deceived and hurt. In the end, the divorce was finalized. Sandra got the house, and I moved into a new apartment. I slowly began rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, but with time, the wounds started to heal. I learned to trust again, focusing on my future rather than the past. The experience left scars, but it also taught me the value of self-respect and the strength to walk away from someone who didn't value me. Sandra's betrayal had ended our marriage, but it didn't define my life. I moved forward, wiser and stronger, ready for a new chapter. Thank you for watching.